Struggling to make sense of your data but short on time? What if I told you that in just 45 minutes you can stop drowning in spreadsheets and start automating like a pro? With Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power BI, you'll save hours, cut out the repetitive hassle, and get actionable insights faster than you ever thought possible. Seriously, magic buttons and automation await. Are you ready to level up? Welcome to your ultimate crash course on the tools that are redefining data analysis and business intelligence. If you're new to the channel, I'm Mike. I'm a senior finance leader, and over the last decade, I've worked in finance everywhere from brand new startups all the way to the Fortune 100. And here's the thing. I knew Power Query, Power Pivot, Power BI existed, and I put off learning them for years. And now that I know them, I am so mad at myself. These things literally cut my work time down 80 to 90%. I'm not joking. That's how powerful these tools are. And they're free and built right into the Excel you already know. So here's the game plan. I'm going to combine Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power BI into this epic guide, and I'm going to get you up and running in less than 45 minutes. Think about Power Query like your cleanup crew. It's the Marie Kondo for your data, helping you transform chaos into clarity. Power Pivot brings you the analysis muscle, lets you crunch numbers and build relationships across huge data sets faster than your CPU ever thought possible. And then there's Power BI. This is the showstopper. Everything comes together, turning rows and columns of data into stunning visuals and dashboards you didn't know you were capable of creating. And oh, by the way, it'll automatically turn that data into reports and send it out to people for you without lifting a finger. So grab your coffee, buckle up, and get ready to level up your data game. All right, with that, let's get started. Let's talk about how to cut your financial reporting time in half using Power Query. What is Power Query? You may have heard about it, you may not have heard about it. Well, it's a tool that's built right into Excel. I'm going to show you that if you haven't used it before, it's been literally sitting right in front of you this entire time. You don't need to download anything, you don't need to put any add-ins on. It's there, ready to go. It does three main things. The first is data transformation, the second is performance enhancement, and the third is automation. So for data transformation, what does this mean? Well, it means you can clean, consolidate, and manage data, and you can even add calculations before they hit the workbooks. What this means is you don't need SQL, you don't need the dreaded nested if function. You can do all of this before it even gets in the workbook. For performance enhancement, it allows you to pull in more than 1 million lines where Excel is capped, and you can pivot straight from data models without ever pulling data into the file. This will make your files shrink down in size. My typical file is 10% smaller using Power Query than it was before. And even better, it's automation. It saves and repeats all of your steps, and you can go back and edit any step if you need a change. Plus, you can push changes through the entire model with just one click. I'm going to show you a really powerful way to do that with mapping tables that will hopefully blow your mind. So how do you use Power Query? Well, anytime you use Power Query, you're going to go through the same 3 steps. You're going to get data, you're going to transform the data, and then you're going to load the data into your workbook where you can then do whatever you need to with pivot charts, other charts, tables, graphs, whatever you need, you'll be able to do that. So again, we're going to get the data, we're going to pull in raw data, pull in mapping tables we need, and this can be anything. It can be Excel, it can be CSV. You can even scrape data out of PDFs and pull from the internet or even your company's servers if you can get your IT systems on board with that. This is incredibly powerful. Think about hello stock analysis. You can just go be scraping data out of companies' financial reports. For transforming data, you can clean up and consolidate multiple data sets, add calculations, mapping, conditional formatting, more, whatever you need to do. And then you can add your data to the data model where Excel will always just query out to the workbooks, or you can pull in a small set of it as an Excel table if you want to make sure that it's easy to send an email off to people. And then you can work with this data using Power Pivot or treat it just like any Excel table using all of the regular formulas and functions that you're used to. And again, all of this without coding, without SQL, without nested if functions. It's going to be a user interface that you're really familiar with. All right, so now let's get out of PowerPoint and let's start working with Power Query. So first I want to introduce you to our data sets. I've got 2 data sets here for you. The first one is a bunch of data from some coffee shops in Manhattan. Let's see how many lines we've got here. I wanted to make sure we got a really big one. All right, so we've got almost 150,000 lines of data, and it's just a lot of transaction data for a coffee shop. The thing is that a lot of times data will come in from the point of sale system and it's not in a usable format the way that the management team likes to look at it. This is a perfect example. There's all these product types, product categories. What do we really need to care about? It's probably not all of these columns. The second thing, we've got a mapping table that I've set up. So on the first tab of the mapping table, we've got the different product types and how management wants to look at it. So it's a lot less, it's a smaller list, and it's really how they run the business and how different managers are responsible for the business. There's also time of day, so the data is pulling in from the point of sale system by hour, but we really treat our customers differently during each section of the day, morning, lunchtime, afternoon, evening, and customers have different behaviors, and we want to be able to track those behaviors. So those are the two mapping tables that we're going to use. Now let's open up a fresh and clean Excel file. All right, nothing like a fresh, clean Excel file. So here's the coolest part if you're not familiar with Power Query. If you go to the Data tab and you see this Get and Transform Data section, that's Power Query. It's been right here in front of you this entire time. Totally free, ready to go. I didn't do anything. This is a normal version of Office 365. It's just right there. Don't believe me? Pause the video and go check. I am sure you'll find it's there. This is the first step. Remember we talked about get data, transform data, load data. This is where we're going to go get our data. Now there's a lot of different options. So I can come down here. Most commonly, you'll probably be using pulling in from text CSV for large data sets from an Excel workbook. Again, you can do PDFs. You can connect directly to your company's databases if your policies will allow for that. A lot of companies don't. But regardless, you can download, you can also come down and get stuff from the web. Whatever you need to do, it's here. One note I do want to make is if you have data in your Excel workbook, like if I had a table here, you have to hit this From Table Range button. You're not going to find that in the dropdown. So let's go ahead and get our data. So I've got an Excel workbook, and we're going to go pull that in. All right. We're going to pull in our coffee shop sales. So now the first one's going to come up. So listed here, you'll see every tab in the workbook and tables. So if you define table names, those will be here, and then also all the tabs. In this case, I only have the data that I need on the transaction tab, so I'm just going to pull that right in. You've got two options down here. You can go to load or you can go to transform data. If I go to transform data, I'm going to open up the Power Query editor. If I load, I'm going to pull it in. I'm not going to go to the editor yet, and that's what we're going to do because I want to pull in another data set. So we're going to go load, and almost always it's safer to use load to, and I'm going to show you why. So for the most part, when you pull data in, you don't want to pull it into the worksheet because you want to keep the worksheet small and performing fast. We just want to create a connection. What this is going to do is it's going to create a mini data cube. You're going to build your own mini data cube, and Excel's only going to go query the data that you need, and it's going to make everything run a lot faster. So we'll hit OK. And then you'll see the query and connection window pop up, and this is a list of every data set that you've connected to. All right, now that pulled in, we're going to go pull in our other one. All right, and we're going to open mapping table, and we're going to import this in the same way. The only difference here is we have two different tables we want to pull in, category and time of day. So we select multiple items, we check both, and then again, I highly recommend using load to just for safety. And we'll pull that into the data model. You'll see we now have 3 data sources because each tab is its own data source. So now we're going to go ahead and open Power Query. So to open the Power Query editor, we're going to go to Get Data, and we're going to hit right here to launch the Power Query editor. This is the Power Query editor, and there's a lot of functionality in here. I'd say I use probably 10 to 20% of it. You can experiment with features. You can even go in and start, doing really complicated things and coding your own transformations, but I'm going to show you the basics of what you need to know to get running, and this will be 80% of what you need to use for anything in finance. So first of all, down here is the window. This is where we're going to see the data we've selected. So I'll just pick the transaction data. So you'll see here's all the data. It's just a preview. Again, it's never pulling in the full data set to save space. And then all of my steps are listed here. We'll go through that more in a moment. So these are the steps of the transformation. And I can come over here and select any of my queries. On the Home tab, you have the basics, the most common. So starting from left to right, over here you can refresh the preview if it's changed. You can choose, add, remove columns, do the same with rows here. You can sort and filter the data set. You can go through split columns, you can group. The grouping is really powerful. Let's say you have these like 20 columns we want. It'll if you condense the columns, it'll start to aggregate the data at those levels, and you can significantly reduce the data set. Just as an example, let's say you've got quarters or months and you just want to have the years, right? If it's quarters, you can literally cut your data set down to a quarter of the size. If it's months to years, you can cut it down to a 1/12 of the size. Super cool. If your headers didn't pull in, you can flip the first row to be headers, you can change values, and just like using SQL, but a lot easier, you can merge queries. That's where you take something like a mapping table we're going to do and merge it in, or you can append queries. That's if you have two identical data sets, then you just kind of add them together. So merging goes this way, and then appending goes that way. And then all the way over to the right, you can pull in sources if you want to do that. If you need to pull in any additional data, you can do that here. Transform is going to just give you a lot more options of the basic transformation you saw on the first page. A couple of really powerful ones. We already talked about group. You have functions in here like transpose. You have replace values in here. You can pivot or unpivot columns. So let's say someone gave you a table and you have the months across the top, but you want those months to go into the rows so the whole data set is just one column of numbers. You can do that here. Super easy. Boy, did I spend a lot of time doing that earlier in my career. There's also a lot of different math functions, formatting functions. So we can come in here, let's say you wanted to divide by 1,000. Here's all your math here, all kinds of different things you can do, absolute value, powers, great stuff. And then columns, this is where you can add in calculations before you ever go into the file. So a couple of really powerful ones you can build from examples. You can build a custom column where you have to write out the code. Do note it is different than regular Excel formulas. There's a lot of resources on both my website and online for that. And then there's conditional columns. This allows you to write out true-false statements with as many true-false statements as you want. Goodbye, nested if functions. And then again, just some stuff we saw before, some math, some different things that you could do. And views is a lot of functions to share, how you want to see the editor built up. So let's get started with our first transformation. So we've got the data pulled in, right? So the first thing we want to do is we want to merge in our mapping tables. So I'm going to hit merge queries. Now my preference, I like to leave the individual data sets separate, and I create a new one, and that's the file that I'm going to import back into my file as the data set. I often have to email workbooks out, and it's just a lot more comfortable, faster, safer if I pull in the core data that I need so people can pivot right out of it. So we're going to go here and we're going to hit merge queries as new. If you wanted to do it in one, you just hit merge queries, but we're going to make a new one. Okay, so this is, you're going to select the columns that you want to align. So the first thing I want to do is category. And I've built my mapping table on product type. There's that. Now we're going to open the category mapping. You'll see here's product type. All right, and then it's going to pull this in. I'm not going to get into fuzzy matching in this video. That's if you don't have perfect matches. These are perfect matches because these are the basics. I will have an advanced course coming later. That'll be a lot of help for things like that. All right, now we're going to pull it in. So if you scroll over to the right, you'll see that it's been added here, but you have to expand it because if you have a lot of mapping columns, you have to tell Power Query what you want to pull in. In this case, I just want to pull in the mapping itself. Cool, so now we have our category. This didn't get a great name, so we're going to rename it. This is going to be category mapped. Well, if I could type, it'd be category mapped. All right, we're going to go category mapped, and you'll see when I expanded the category and I renamed it, it's saving all the steps. If I go back to source, you're going to see it's just the original pull in here, and then as I expand the category, rename the columns, you can go back and adjust all of your steps. All right, so now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull in our time of day. So let's go back here. We're going to merge our queries again. This time I can hit just merge queries because I have my new query. We're going to select our hour, which is how our mapping table is built. Here's our time of day. Hit OK, and then we're going to repeat that same step where we expand it. All right, and there's our time of day. So now we're going to group this data set down to kind of the core information that we need. All right, so we're going to go to group by. You will almost always be using advanced. I can't think of a time I've ever used basic. Advanced lets you pull in as many of these as you want to. We're going to start off with our new grouping. So we're going to have time of day. We're going to have the category mapped. We're going to pull in, we want the store location. And then we need to pull in our revenue as the value field. So this is going to be revenue. We're going to sum that, and we're going to sum revenue. All right, and now let's see what our new file looks like. There we go. So now we just have the time of day, the category, the store location, and the revenue, and this is the main analysis that we're going to do. So let's go ahead and pull that in. So we're going to go close and load 2, and this time we are going to add it to the worksheet. We don't need to add it to the data model because all the data is already in there. So we're just going to pull this in, and this is going to be the data set that we work with. So now our data set's been pulled in. You'll see it's a table. We can, of course, change that name if we want to have a little bit better file hygiene, but this is the table. Now, here's where we're going to go back and change the mapping. You've decided that add-ons can go right into other drinks. You don't want to track them separately. So how would we push that change through? Well, we're going to go to mapping table, and we're just going to get rid of the add-on category. So these are syrups, so we're going to say those go into other drinks. It's small, and the management just doesn't want to have to track that. So now we've gotten rid of the add-ins. We're going to come back here, and here's the really cool part. You don't even have to go back to Power Query. You can just go to Data, hit Refresh All, and it's automatically going to run that mapping change for you, and you're going to see add-ons wiped away, all mapped to a new category. And look at that, add-ons wiped away, completely mapped into new categories. Just to show you they're gone, now we just have coffee drinks, other drinks, food, and merchandise. Awesome. Then from this step, so you can go back, you can apply any new transformations, you can always just refresh the file. Let's say that you pull in a new data set every month. You can just pull in the data set every month. If you save it as the same thing, it'll just automatically pull in. If it changes, you want to go back and adjust the source and just move it over, but that's really it. You've automated this, but what do we do with this data? Well, this is where you can quickly pull in some power pivots. So now that we have this table, let's say that we want to put in a pivot chart. The great thing about these is that they'll automatically update when you update the data set. All right, so here's our time of day, here's our category, and here's our revenue. And then we're going to filter by store location. All right, and let's say instead of this way, we're going to flip this. We're going to do our categories by time of day. So with that data, straight out of the data model, we can see that our coffee drinks are biggest in the morning. That makes sense. So is food. I mean, really the entire business is largest in the morning, which makes sense, but you do see other drinks kind of come up in the afternoon. Food's pretty stable all day, but it's a little bit bigger at lunchtime than it is the rest of the day. So you can start to pull these trends out. And again, if you make any changes to the data model, it'll all flow through here. So just imagine how powerful this all is. Your mapping table's automated, your data transformation. I mean, let's go back and as an example, let's say I wanted to divide all this into thousands. Okay, we'll just do that real quick. So I'm going to go back to data. I'm going to go to get data. Say I just want to clean this up a little bit. We'll launch the editor. And it really is just so fast. So I want to come down here. We're going to divide by 1,000. Amazing, and there's your new column. So then I would go back. I'm going to close and load. We're going to refresh the pivot table, pull out those values, put in the new values, and there's all of our numbers divided by 1,000. So that's great. We've divided everything into 1,000. Now I want to show you one last thing, which is how to create a conditional column. So let's say that if it is at the Hell's Kitchen store and it's the afternoon, it's happy hour, okay? Let's say that that store specifically does a happy hour. Let's go back to data. We're going to launch our Power Query editor. And now we're going to come in and add a conditional column. So for this one, to do the if functions and then functions, you want to hit conditional column. It's a lot easier than writing out the formula. We're going to call this column happy hour. So we're going to say if store location does not equal Hell's Kitchen, then no. And if time of day does not equal afternoon, then no. Otherwise, yes, and this is going to tell us if it's happy hour or not. All right, so here's an example. So this is an afternoon purchase in Hell's Kitchen, and there it is. Yes, it's happy hour. We'll go back. We're going to close and load this, and we're going to watch our data set update. And look at that, updated automatically, and anytime you make any changes, it's just all pushed through the entire data set, and then it becomes available in your Power Pivots, in your charts, tables, whatever you want to do, ready for you to go in Excel. I hope this is as helpful to you as it's been to me. Power Query has absolutely transformed the way that I work with financial data. It lets me use more data, analyze it better, analyze it faster, and saves all my steps so I don't have to run them again. Let's learn Power Pivot in 13 minutes. So what is Power Pivot? Well, it is a powerful data tool built right into Excel. That's right, you don't need to spend any money or get fancy add-ons. It's right there, ready for you. It helps manage and analyze large amounts of data that traditional pivot tables can't handle. It allows you to create complex data models where you can link different data sets together. It'll automate calculations and data processing before it ever gets into your workbook. Can you say goodbye nested if functions? Bye-bye. It'll save you time by streamlining repetitive tasks. It can connect to multiple data sources for better insights, and it enhances Excel with advanced analytical capabilities that you couldn't do normally. There's a couple terms you need to know before using Power Pivot. These are things that are used repeatedly in the software that you're probably not familiar with. The first is a data model. This is a collection of multiple tables and how they're related together, which is the way Power Pivot works. And don't worry, we'll go through all of this live. There's DAX, which stands for Data Analysis Expressions. This is a different formula language than Excel that's used in Power Pivot to create these complex calculations within your tables. There's calculated columns. These are columns you add to your data model and then use DAX formulas to calculate these values. Measures are the calculations created using DAX. These can summarize data, totals, averages, and they're used in your pivot tables. And then there's relationships. These are connections between different tables in a data model, and they allow you to combine the data by looking for similarities between the data sets. All right, that is quite enough time in PowerPoint. Let's get started in Excel. So I've got 3 data sets that we're going to use today. Our goal is to calculate the revenue for different categories for a coffee shop. But the problem is the data is living in different places. So here we have the number of transactions or times different products were sold, when they were sold, all that great stuff. So we have the transactions, but we don't have the prices. The prices are sitting in this other one called price. So we have all of our prices over here. And then if we go to our mapping table, this is going to tell us the categories and the time of day, which is how management likes to track this. And again, they're sitting in 3 different places. So the first thing we need to do is we need to take our data and add it to a data model. Okay. So now that I've shown you these, I'm going to close the workbook. And we're going to open up a new one and pull this data in. We're going to pull this data in using Power Query. If you haven't had a chance to learn Power Query, you'll see the basics here, but go ahead and watch a video that I'll link right here that goes in depth in Power Query in just a few minutes. All right, so we've got our brand new Excel workbook, and we're going to go ahead and pull the data in. You can find Power Query right here, and this is where we're going to pull the data in. All 3 files I showed you are Excel. Now we can pull all kinds of things in, but we're going to use Excel in this case, and we're going to pull in our 3 files. All right, so here's our coffee shop sales. We'll go ahead and import that. I want to pull in my transaction table. And I'm going to load to, and I want to click load to because I want to make sure I add this to the data model. And I only need a connection. The data model is what Power Pivot will work on. Power Query can pull it into your workbook. It can pull it a lot of different places. I want to pull it into the data model so that we can work with it in Power Pivot. All right, so that's our transactions. Now we're going to go get our product pricing. And if you want to transform the data, and again, there's a great video on this, if you want to transform the data, you would do that in Power Query. You can do that before you get in, but we're just going to work in Power Pivot because this is all about speed. All right, and then last, we're going to pull in our mapping table. Here we want to select multiple options. We want to have both of these available. So now that we've got our data in, we're going to go and open up Power Pivot. All right, so here's our Power Pivot table here, and there's not a ton of options, and because it is super easy to use. So first of all, you can click Manage. This is going to open up the data model. We'll do that in a second. Here's where you can create measures and KPIs. Again, these are the calculations that you're going to be able to pull out. Same with KPIs. If you have any tables in here, you can just add them straight into the data model, and then you can also detect relationships, and sometimes Power Pivot will find them themselves. But we're going to go ahead and click the data model button and open this up. So now we've got our Power Pivot window opened up. You'll see that all of our data is pulled in here. So here's all the tables that I showed you earlier. They're available right on the bottom. On the home table, you can get additional data if you want to. You can generate a pivot table straight from here. And if you go to the design, this is where you can do most of what we'll do today with calculations and relationships. There are a few things on the advanced tab, but again, that's outside the scope of this video. That'll be in an advanced video later on. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create relationships between the tables. Now there's two ways to do that. There's the slightly more complex way with more detail, but there's also a fast way that I'm going to show you. So you can click the create relationship button here and do it by linking up the tables, but there's a faster, better way that I like to do it. And that's by coming to view and clicking this diagram view button right here. The diagram view is going to open up our tables. Okay, we see them all here. And this is going to let us link them up right here. So I'm going to open this up a little bit. So now all we have to do is drag the matching attribute from one to the other where they match. So we're going to take product ID and connect it to product ID. All right, and you see the link has been created. So we're going to go ahead and link column 1, which we know is our product category, even though it's not labeled, over to product category. You see the relationship's been created there. All right, and then lastly, we just want to take time of day, or hour rather, and we're going to connect hour to hour. And now all of our relationships are set up. If you're enjoying the video so far, I would really appreciate if you would take a second and hit that like button. It really helps me out as I try to create better content. And also, if you haven't already, I would really appreciate if you subscribe to the channel. I post a brand new video every single Monday, and I don't want to make you miss a single one of our unfiltered finance videos. So now I'm going to go ahead and insert a pivot table. The trick is you want to make sure that you insert it from the data model. So where you would normally just hit the button or select table range, you want to make sure that you click from data model. We're going to put this on the existing worksheet, and now you use it just like a regular pivot table, except in the background, all of this extra data is being accumulated and calculated for you. So now that we've got our pivot table inserted, you'll see that all of the 4 columns are here. Now, this may look just like a regular pivot table, but the really cool thing is you can pull data in from any of the related tables, and if you've created a relationship, it's going to automatically connect that and let you pull in values from anywhere. But what we're still missing is revenue, because we've got our prices in one place and our transaction quantity in another. So this is where we're going to use a DAX formula to bring that all together in one place without having to do any calculations straight in our Excel workbook. This is when you can say goodbye to things like VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, SUMIFs, all that stuff you can do right in Power Pivot. So to create a DAX formula, we're going to go up to measures and we're going to hit new measure. Now, there's a lot of different formulas available in here. You'll see a whole list. I'm going to have some resources on the blog. I'll put that down in the comment. Make sure to go check that out. But you can also just go through these and kind of see what each one does. In this case, we're going to use a function called SUMX. It's SUMX because it's reiterative, and that means that it's going to go through and do this calculation at every single row in the table, not just sum the entire total. Just like in Excel, it tells us what it needs. The first thing it needs is the table. We want to do this calculation in the transactions table. Then we need to put in an expression, and this is where we're going to multiply our quantity times our price. So for the first one, the quantity is right here, and then we're going to multiply that by our price. But how do we pull that in? Because price isn't in this table. Well, we use a function called related, and it's going to say for each of these product IDs where we have a quantity, pull in the price. So we're going to call related, and this is an easy formula. It's just the column you want to pull from, and we've already linked these two up with product ID. So we'll go ahead and close that. We'll hit enter. And there's our revenue just like that. And now we can go ahead, we're going to pull in our time of day. I want to make sure we don't have any filters on here so we can see everything. So we've got our time of day pulled in. We're going to go ahead and pull in our product category, and there you go. So measure 1 again is our revenue right here. And it's all being calculated by multiplying the quantity times the price at every single level. There's just so many different ways you can use Power Pivot, including, you can do multi-step calculations. The possibilities are endless, all with this framework that I've showed you. Don't forget that just like with regular pivot tables, you can use this any way you want. You can add in slicers for filtering. You can go in here and insert pivot charts. The really cool thing about this is that as you make any changes to the data model, all of that's going to become available right in your charts, right in your data set, and it's all going to update automatically. How cool is that? The biggest thing that I want you to take away from this video is that Power Pivot gives you the ability to do a lot of the calculations, things like VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, index match, sum ifs, all of those things that you've been doing by connecting tables yourself manually. Power Pivot gives you the ability to do all of that automatically on the back end before you ever pull it in, to relate tables to one another by that easy drag and drop that we showed, and then to build these really complex visualizations that just update themselves automatically, and this will save you so much time. So let's get started and learn how to build a financial dashboard in just minutes. The most important thing to begin is to start with the end. That is the end in mind of what the dashboard needs to do. The first question to ask yourself: what is the goal of the dashboard? What are you hoping to accomplish? Following that, who will use the dashboard? Who will use the dashboard and what do they need? It's also important to understand, are you replacing an existing report and you need to incorporate that functionality, or are you starting from scratch? And then to that point, what information should be included? What is truly the most important information that the user of your dashboard needs to know? Don't start anything until you have the answer to these 4 questions. So how do you go about building a dashboard? Well, I have a 7-step framework, each of which is critical and builds on the last. The first, as we already talked, is to set objectives and goals by starting with the end in mind. The second, once you've answered those 4 questions, outline your dashboard. I personally like to get just a plain 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and I draw out what I want it to look like, what I want the KPIs to look like, what I want the P&Ls to look like, how I want it to be structured, and what will be most usable. Then that way I know what I'm doing before I ever start building. Next, once you've laid it out, figure out what data and other inputs you need and gather those together in a clean and condensed form. A dashboard is just a tool to report on data, so you have to have all your data sources ready to go and cleaned up. Then you can actually start building the dashboard in your tool of choice, which we'll talk about some tools shortly. You want to go in and code this on top of whatever data you're using. I'll show you how to do it really fast using Power BI and get it up and running. Then, critical, test and adjust. Especially if you're coming off of an existing report, you want to run the dashboard and make sure you're getting the same results. If it's not an existing product, you want to still compare back to some benchmark or other key reports to make sure the data is accurate and coming through as you expect. Now, this is where most people stop, assuming they even do test and adjust, but you need to keep going if you want anyone to use this. The next step, and I think the most critical and most skipped, is change management. This is where you have to go out to the potential users of the dashboard. You have to train them on the dashboard, show them the functionality, and explain to them the benefits of moving off of their older or legacy reporting onto your new tool. And then continuous enhancement. As people start to use the dashboard, as you use the dashboard, you might find new features or new functionality that people are asking for, and you'll continuously enhance it because this dashboard is a living, breathing thing that you want to constantly be as up to date as possible. Steps 6 and 7 are what causes the failure of dashboarding projects, no matter how good the dashboard is. So what are some common dashboard tools that we can use? Well, for a very basic dashboard, if you just can't get your hands on any other software, Excel is a great option. You can build some stuff in. It's not going to be as automated or as fancy as some of the other platforms, but it will get the job done in a pinch. Next is the first step in a dashboard, and that's Power BI. Power BI is built right into Excel, and it's a fantastic option to get your feet wet. There's free versions as well, which is great. A lot of Office 365 subscriptions included. Great way to get off the ground. Then there's the 3 big dashboarding specific platforms. This includes Tableau, which is the most common and best known, Click, and ThoughtSpot. These 3 all have different user interfaces, but very similar functionality. At the end of the day, you pull in data and then you visualize on top of the data. And then there's so many more tools. Almost every single customized reporting or planning solution that we use in finance, these will all have their own dashboarding capabilities built right in. Very similar functionality, just not a specific dashboarding platform like the ones listed here. So now what I want to do is I want to take you through a case study. We're going to open up Power BI and we're going to go through this live. But first we want to answer our 4 questions. What is the goal of our dashboard? Our dashboard is to pull in critical financial metrics and critical KPIs for our CFO to look at. This would be something that he would open up every Monday morning to understand the state of the business. Who will use the dashboard? Well, we just answered it, the CFO, but also the CFO's leadership committee. When we say a CFO dashboard, it doesn't mean that necessarily just the CFO will use it, but it's a CFO view of the business. Are we replacing an existing report? Yes, we are. This is currently an Excel spreadsheet that is sent out. It's very clunky, has to be manually produced every week, so we're going to send that out and automate it. And what information should be included? Well, we're going to look at critical things. We want to look at revenue, things like gross margin, our operating profit, and then some critical KPIs to the business. And we want to put those all in one spot. All right, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to open up Power BI. Assuming you have a Power BI subscription in Office 365, you can either go through Office 365 or go to app.powerbi.com, and then this window will open. Again, any dashboarding software, you're going to want to pull in data and then you visualize on top of the data. So the first step is pulling in the data. So I have my data. It is a T-Mobile data set. So what I've done is I pulled down the last quarterly earnings, and in this file, we've got balance sheet, we've got income statement and metrics, and this is Excel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to open up Excel. And in this case, we're going to upload a file and T-Mobile data. So now that I've pulled the data in, you'll see all of the data that's available for me to pull in. Now this comes in two different ways. The first is tables. You'll see this up here with the little header highlighted, and then you can also pull in an entire tab. Now in this case, just to simplify this, I've only set up tables on each page. There's no other data, but what we're going to do is we're going to pull in the three tables. So just as an example, here's all of my balance sheet data. So there's all of our accounts by year. We'll see something very similar for income statement. And we'll see something very similar for metrics. All right, so we're going to go ahead and pull that in to Power BI. So now what you'll see is that Power BI is pulling in the data. Now what's really important to understand is Power BI is built to work with Power Query. Power Query is a fantastic tool that allows you to clean and manage data, and most importantly, it will save your steps and repeat them. Now you can use this just in Excel without having to use Power BI. I have a great video on this. I'm going to put the link for that video right here. Make sure to check this out because Power Query underlies everything in Power BI, and it can help you across Excel. So now what you'll see is that we have the Power BI dashboard pulled up. So there's a few different areas to point out. First of all, you'll see this is where we actually build the dashboard. Just like Excel, you can have multiple pages. We're just going to work with one to keep it simple for today, but this is where you will lay everything out. Over here, you have filters that you can apply, you have visualizations, and then you have all of the different data that you've pulled in, and you'll see the three tables that we pulled in right here. So let's get started building our CFO dashboard. The first thing we want to do, well, it needs a title. We'll come up here to text box, and just like we do in any other system, we're going to call this the CFO dashboard. We're going to format this. Okay. And there is the CFO dashboard. We'll do a little bit bold too, just for fun. So now we've got a title. So now the next thing we want to look at is the CFO is going to want to see our revenue, our gross margin, and our operating profit. Those will probably look really good if we look at those over time to kind of understand if we're growing or if we're shrinking. Okay, so in this case, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to visualize our revenue, our gross margin, and our operating income across time. So for that, our y-axis is going to be the values. So we're going to click that, and Power BI will try to figure out what you want. So a lot of times it will put it in the right place. In this case, I clicked sum of value, and it put it in the y-axis correctly. Attribute, let's see where this goes. Yep, that went across the x-axis. Now this is the sum of all of the values. But what I actually want to do is I want to have a breakdown here for account, and I want the ability to look at just specific accounts on different lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply this as a filter on the visual. So for this visual, now this is important. You have filters on the visual, which will apply just to the visual I've selected, or you can filter on this page or on all pages. Now what I don't want to do is filter on the page because then I won't have access to this data anywhere else. So what I want to do is filter on the visual and pull in specific accounts. All right, so the ones we want here is we want total revenues, we want operating income, total operating expenses. So now that we have our data loaded in, the last thing that we want to do is we want to pull in formatting for the chart. So in this case, you can come over to the formatting tab. I'm going to go to general. Let's give this a new title. Instead of sum of value, I want to call this revenue and profit over time. Okay, so now we've changed that, and then you can come in, there's all kinds of different options. You can change the color, you can change the ranges, really anything you can do in Excel, you can do here. The rest of it looks good, I just want to change the title, we'll leave that here for now. Next we're going to look at the balance sheet. So what's the most important about the balance sheet? Well, a balance sheet isn't as interesting over time for a CFO. What's really interesting is what has changed on the balance sheet from the last reporting period. Because unlike profitability, which kind of happens on a daily basis, we evaluate balance sheets at the end of a period. So in this case, a great tool for us to use is a waterfall chart. So I'm going to take a waterfall chart in. This is going to be our waterfall chart for the balance sheet. And boy, earlier in my career, I spent so much time building and manipulating these in Excel. The fact that I can really just drag and drop this is incredible. So now we're going to pull in some balance sheet data. So of course, we'll pull in the accounts, we'll pull in the attributes, and we'll pull in the values. Now, you'll see that automatically it's pulled something in for us. This is not quite what we're looking for. It didn't really put everything exactly where we wanted to. So let's take a look at how we can move this around. Okay, so our breakdown is going to be account. We want that there. Okay, and then we're going to have our category be the attribute. So the category is going to be kind of the fixed points, and the breakdown is going to be how things have changed. The y-axis in this case is then the sum of values. But we really don't want all of these periods here. This is not easy to look at. We just want to look at one period to another. So just like we did before for this visual, we can filter this on the attributes. So I'm going to come up to attributes, and I just want to look at the most recent 2 quarters and how they changed. Look at that. We have a fantastic waterfall chart going from Q1 2024 to Q2 2024 and explaining how this changed over time. Awesome. Again, we're going to go and change the title on this. I want to make sure we have the right one selected. We're going to go to title, and we're going to call this balance sheet cause of change. All right, and there we go. So now for this, we want to look at how they're performing over time. We want to look at how the KPIs are performing over time. We might also want to look at 2 different things together. So in the telecom space, you'll see postpaid, which is kind of the higher value plans, and then prepaid, which are plans paid up front for people who don't have as good of credit. So we might want to look at these trends over time. So I'm going to pull in a clustered chart. This is going to allow us to look at some of these trends over time. We're going to pull in attribute, metric, and value and see what it does. Okay, so we're close. The attribute's great. We have all the quarters there. It's pulling in the metrics and showing them over time at the value, but there's way too much data on here. But we don't necessarily know what the CFO is going to want to look like. So this is where we pull in a really cool tool called a slicer that will allow the user to look at what data they want to look at. So we're going to come over here, we're going to add it just like it's a chart, and this slicer is going to come in. So now what I want to pull in is I want to pull in my metrics. So by adding it, you'll see we have all of our different metrics here, and I can pick which one I want to look at. So if I want to look at postpaid phone ARPU, there's my chart of this over time, and the graph automatically updates. If I want to look at prepaid ARPU, there you go, and you can see that that's kind of declining as we go. If I want to look at total customers, there it is. So what this does is it allows us to build a chart and use the power of dashboards to create as many charts as we need to, but the user can look at just what they want. So what we've given here is 3 very distinct charts. We're showing the revenue and profit over time, we're showing a balance sheet cause of change, and then we're looking at different metrics, how they perform over time, and the user can choose it. So this is the base of our report. Now I'm going to leave this on total customers, and the last thing I want to show you is how you automatically can push this out to your users. So the first thing you have to do is to subscribe to our report, or to have this automatically sent out. It needs to be saved to the cloud. So we're going to go up here, we're going to click save, and we're going to call this CFO dashboard. All right, we'll hit save, and now our report is being saved. So now our report is published and it is available to other users. So we can share the dashboard directly, but then we can also do the subscribe to report feature and have it sent out automatically. So I'm going to click the subscribe button. We're going to create a subscription. We're going to call this monthly CFO dashboard. I want this to repeat every month. We'll say we want this on the first day of the month, and we want it to go out at 9 a.m. All right, so everything looks good, and now we're going to hit the save button. And here our subscription is sent. Then what you would do is you would come back, you hit the edit button, and then you can add whatever recipients you want to this, and it will automatically send out at this date and time, sending your full report. What a powerful tool. So I have just shown you how incredibly quickly you can create a dashboard. We did the dashboard creation itself in under 10 minutes and got a very basic but very effective product out. And just imagine I showed you maybe 1% of the features available in Power BI. Just imagine what else there is to do. If you take away just one thing from this video, I want you to understand that these tools are approachable. With just the basics that I've shown you, you can get 80% of the benefit. Sure, there's a lot of buttons and advanced features and all other kinds of things we can do, but what you've seen today will get you going and honestly will automate the core finance processes that we all do. So don't be scared to get started. If you have any questions, just let me know down in the comments. I'm more than happy to help. I've also got a lot of other great content diving deeper into these tools, both on YouTube and on my website. Happy to help, and I'm so excited for your power journey to get started.